Picture this: a retired couple, both in their late 60s, sitting at a kitchen table in the Florida home they'd spent 20 years dreaming about. They're not arguing, they're not panicking. They're just quiet, staring at a piece of paper that arrived in the mail that morning, their homeowner's insurance renewal. The number on it is larger than their entire annual property tax bill was just 5 years ago. They haven't made a single claim. Their home hasn't changed. Their neighborhood looks exactly the same as it did when they moved in. But the state around them has changed in ways they never saw coming. And now the retirement they planned for decades in the place they chose deliberately and carefully simply doesn't fit the numbers anymore. Within 3 months, they listed the house. That story is not unique. It's playing out right now in 10 states across this country. States that are quietly losing retirees faster than almost anyone expected. Some of these states are the ones you'd guess immediately. Others might genuinely surprise you. And one of them, sitting at number 1 on this list, has been sending retirees packing for so many consecutive years that the pattern has stopped looking like a trend and started looking like a verdict. Welcome to Settled Living, where we help retirees and near retirees make smarter decisions about where to live and how to make their money last. Before we go any further, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. We post new retirement and relocation content every week, and we genuinely don't want you to miss it. Let's get into the countdown. At number 10, Oregon. Oregon doesn't come up in retirement conversations as often as California or New York. But the trend data tells a clear and consistent story. The state taxes retirement income. The cost of living in Portland and the Willamette Valley runs significantly above the national average. And housing costs have been climbing for years in ways that catch retirees off guard. Picture a retired librarian named Helen, who spent her career in Eugene and genuinely loved everything about Oregon: the green, the culture, the rain she'd grown up with, the neighbors she'd known for 30 years. But after retirement, her fixed income started losing ground every single year to property taxes and utility costs that never seemed to stop rising. Helen didn't want to leave Oregon. She wanted Oregon to be affordable enough to stay in. When it stopped being that, she followed her daughter to Tennessee and quietly became one more name in a very long list of retirees who left not out of desire, but out of math. But the next state has been losing retirees for a specific reason that surprises people even more. Because it involves a trap that's almost invisible until you're already inside it. At number 9, Connecticut. Connecticut makes this list for reasons that are both financial and structural. And the combination is what makes it particularly difficult for retirees trying to hold on. Connecticut is among the primary states retirees leave, driven by high taxes and a high cost of living, where retirement income simply doesn't stretch as far. The state still taxes Social Security benefits for many recipients, which is increasingly rare as other states have moved to exempt them entirely. Property taxes in many Connecticut towns are among the highest in the country, and the cost of ordinary daily life adds up in ways that steadily chip away at a fixed income month after month. Not dramatically, just persistently. Picture a retired office manager named Barbara who owned a small home in a Connecticut suburb for over 20 years. She'd paid it off, which she assumed would make retirement manageable. What she hadn't fully accounted for was that her property tax bill alone was now consuming more of her monthly income than her mortgage ever had. She eventually sold, moved to South Carolina, and described the first month in her new home as the first time in years she'd felt like the money was working for her instead of running away from her. At number 8, Massachusetts. Massachusetts has exceptional health care, a rich cultural scene, and a quality of life that genuinely earns its reputation. But for retirees on fixed incomes, the full financial picture here is punishing in ways that don't always show up in the brochure. The effective tax burden is among the highest in New England. Housing costs run well above national averages, and everyday expenses from groceries to utilities tend to run higher than what retirees find when they move south. Picture a retired firefighter named Paul, who spent 30 years serving his community outside Boston and fully intended to retire there. When he finally sat down with a calculator and ran the real numbers, the property taxes alone on his modest home were consuming a portion of his monthly budget he simply couldn't sustain over a full retirement. He moved to North Carolina. His monthly housing costs dropped significantly, and he said the hardest part of leaving wasn't the logistics or the goodbyes. It was accepting that the state he'd devoted his career to had quietly priced his retirement out from underneath him. The next state on this list is one most people associate with sunshine and possibility, which makes what's been happening there recently even more striking to sit with. At number 7, Florida. Florida appearing on a list of states retirees are leaving might feel like a contradiction, and covering it honestly requires saying something that most retirement videos won't say directly. Florida recorded the largest nationwide number of retirement-age residents moving out of any state in 2025, with nearly 45,000 seniors leaving in a single year. Florida still draws more retirees than any other state in the country, and for many people, it remains exactly the right choice. But a growing number of retirees who moved there over the past decade are discovering that the Florida they arrived in has changed in ways that affect the financial picture significantly. Homeowners insurance in coastal communities can run $5,000 to $30,000 or more per year. Condo special assessments are landing residents with tens of thousands of dollars in bills they never budgeted for. And the traffic and overcrowding in some of the most popular retirement communities have reached levels that affect daily quality of life in ways no amount of sunshine fully compensates for. Picture Frank and Dorothy, who moved to a Gulf Coast community 8 years ago and loved it for the first several years, with a genuine, uncomplicated happiness they hadn't expected to feel so fully. Then insurance costs spiked, HOA fees climbed, and the community that had felt like a dream started accumulating a financial weight they hadn't signed up for. They relocated to South Carolina and say the move, which had felt almost disloyal to even consider, ended up feeling obvious within 6 months of making it. At number 6, Illinois. Illinois consistently ranks among the top states for senior outmigration, and the reason is a combination that financial analysts have been flagging for years. Illinois carries the second highest property tax rate in the entire country, with effective rates that push annual bills well into 5 figures for many homeowners. The state fully exempts Social Security and pension income from income tax, which sounds genuinely attractive, but the property tax burden offsets that advantage in ways most retirees don't fully work out until they're already living there, and the bills have started arriving. Picture a retired high school principal named Richard, who entered retirement feeling genuinely prepared. His pension was solid, his Social Security was on the way, but his property tax bill kept climbing every year, and the state's ongoing fiscal challenges created a low-grade anxiety about what public services and pensions might actually look like 10 or 15 years down the road. Richard moved to Tennessee. His costs dropped, and he says the most unexpected part of leaving wasn't the money. It was how much quieter his mind got once the uncertainty stopped being a background presence in every financial decision he made. The next state on this list is losing retirees for a reason that surprises almost everyone, because on paper, it actually looks like a retirement advantage. At number 5, Washington State. Washington gets less attention than California or New York in retirement conversations, but it shares enough of the same financial pressures to be appearing on this list in growing numbers. There's no state income tax, which initially sounds like a real advantage for retirees, but Washington offsets it with a high cost of living, particularly in and around Seattle, significant sales taxes, and a housing market that has stayed expensive even as other markets have cooled. For retirees who own their homes outright, the lack of income tax is genuinely meaningful. But for those navigating daily life on a fixed income in a high-cost metro, the advantage erodes faster than most people anticipate. Picture a retired engineer named Thomas who lived outside Seattle for most of his working life and stayed through his first few years of retirement before the monthly numbers slowly stopped making sense. He relocated to Arizona, and after about 3 months there, he said something simple to his wife that she still repeats when anyone asks why they moved. He said he hadn't realized how much stress he'd been carrying until he felt it leave. Are you currently living in one of these states, or have you already made the move? Tell us in the comments. We read every one, and your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. At number 4, California. California was the #1 state for retirees leaving to relocate elsewhere, with 18% of all out-of-state retirement moves originating there. 18%. Nearly 1 in 5 retirees who crossed state lines in 2025 started in California. Many retirees there say the cost of housing, even for those who already own their homes, has become overwhelming due to property taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs that compound quietly year after year. Everyday expenses from groceries to utilities to healthcare run higher than national averages across the board. And California's income tax, which applies broadly to retirement income, creates a burden that accumulates significantly over the course of a long retirement. Picture a retired teacher named Susan who spent 35 years in the San Diego school system and loved California in a way that felt almost impossible to fully articulate to people who hadn't lived there. She also watched her savings erode faster than her projections had planned for, and eventually made the move to Arizona, where she says she recovered her financial footing within the first year and stopped waking up at night running numbers in her head. At number 3, New Jersey. New Jersey had the highest outbound migration rate of any state, with 62% of recorded moves leaving the state in 2025. And that was the 8th consecutive year New Jersey sat at the top of that list. 8 years in a row. That's not a data quirk or a pandemic blip. That's a sustained, documented pattern of people deciding the financial environment no longer works for them. Housing costs, including taxes, insurance, and utilities, are a relentless strain for retirees on fixed incomes, and many older adults in New Jersey describe feeling financially trapped in a state they genuinely love but can no longer afford to age in. A retiree with $70,000 a year in income in New Jersey can face $12,000 to $18,000 annually in combined state income taxes and property taxes alone. Over a 20-year retirement, the difference between staying and moving to a state like Florida or Tennessee can amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Picture a retired accountant named Carol who understood numbers better than most people and still found herself stunned at how quickly her fixed income was being absorbed by a state she'd called home for 40 years. She moved to North Carolina, and she says the first bill that came in under budget felt less like a financial event and more like a physical relief. The state at number 2 is the second largest source of retirees leaving to relocate elsewhere in the entire country, and the story happening there has a layer most people never hear about. At number 2, New York. New York contributed 11% of all retirees seeking a new place to live outside their home state, the second highest share in the country. In total volume, New York leads the nation with the largest absolute population decline from state to state moves of any state over the past 5 years. For retirees specifically, New York combines income tax rates approaching 10.9%, with property taxes in many suburban counties that rank among the most expensive anywhere in the nation, and New York's tax authority is known to actively audit former residents who claim to have relocated, sometimes pursuing taxes on income even after a retiree has physically moved away. The financial pressure here doesn't always end the moment someone leaves. Picture a retired attorney named Margaret, who spent 40 years in suburban New York and watched friends leave one by one over the course of a decade before she finally ran the numbers for herself. When she saw what staying was going to cost her compared to what leaving could free up over the rest of her retirement, she joined the quiet exodus to North Carolina and described the decision not as leaving home, but as finally being able to afford one. And now, number 1. The state that has appeared at the top of outmigration data year after year that combines almost every financial pressure on this list into a single retirement environment, and whose retirees consistently describe the same arc: decades of genuine love for the place, then a slow, unavoidable reckoning with what staying there actually costs. That state is Hawaii. Hawaii earns the #1 position not because it's losing the highest raw volume of retirees, but because it creates the most complete and inescapable retirement financial trap of any state in the country. The annual cost of a comfortable retirement in Hawaii runs over $117,000, the highest of any state in the nation. Nearly everything costs more because nearly everything has to be shipped in from the mainland. Healthcare runs above average. Housing is among the most expensive in the country. And the warmth and beauty that draw retirees there in the first place never quite offset what monthly life actually costs once the honeymoon of arrival fades into routine. Picture a retired contractor named Gerald, who moved to Honolulu after selling his mainland home, expecting his savings to carry him comfortably through the retirement he'd spent decades building toward. The first few months felt exactly like the dream. Morning walks along the beach, evenings watching the sun drop into the water, friends back home calling to say they couldn't believe he actually lived there. Then the grocery bills came in at nearly double what he'd paid before. Then the utility bills. Then the routine maintenance on his home, where parts and labor both carried island pricing. None of it felt catastrophic on its own. The problem was that every single category cost more at the same time, quietly, month after month, without pause. By the third year, Gerald found himself checking his account balance more often than he ever had during his entire working life, watching numbers move in a direction his projections hadn't anticipated. He eventually returned to the mainland and settled in a small Tennessee community. He told a friend who helped him move something that has stayed with her ever since. He said he didn't lose paradise. He just finally understood what it was actually costing him. Let's come back to where we started. That retired couple sitting quietly at their Florida kitchen table, staring at an insurance bill that had changed the math of everything they'd planned. They didn't leave because they were careless or unprepared. They left because the state around them changed faster than their fixed income could absorb. And staying began to cost them something they hadn't budgeted for: peace of mind. Every person on this list experienced some version of that same moment. Helen in Oregon, Barbara in Connecticut, Paul in Massachusetts, Frank and Dorothy in Florida, Richard in Illinois, Thomas in Washington, Susan in California, Carol in New Jersey, Margaret in New York, Gerald in Hawaii. None of them failed at retirement. They simply discovered, in some cases slowly and in others all at once, that the state they loved had stopped being a place where their retirement income could do what they'd worked their entire lives to make it do. That's the real lesson here. Retirement isn't just about how much you've saved or when you start collecting Social Security. It's about where those dollars land when the paychecks stop. The right state doesn't just save you money, it changes how you feel when you wake up in the morning, how much you lie awake at night running numbers, and how much of your actual retirement you get to spend living instead of worrying. If this video helped you see your own situation a little more clearly, please like it, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a future retirement or relocation guide from Settled Living. And we'd love to know, is your state on this list? Are you thinking about leaving, or have you already made the move? Tell us in the comments below. We read every single one, and your story might be exactly what someone else watching this video right now needs to hear. We'll see you in the next one.